It's just preparing. We're up to 30 attendants, which is great.
This is my home in London where I write all my books.
I can see by all the books. Great. Welcome everyone. Thank you for being patient as we set up for the webinar. We're here with the renowned Dr. Patrick Holford, which is very exciting. Personally, I'm a very big fan. And just a little bit of context, Dr. Patrick Holford is founder of the Institute for Optimum Nutrition in the UK. And his patron was twice, not once, but twice, the Nobel Prize winner, Dr. Linus Pauling, who really put vitamin C on the map. And, especially now in today's world, vitamin C is a really big trending topic, which I'm sure you will address in today's webinar. Dr. Patrick is someone who knows more about vitamin C, D, zinc, and other important nutrients more than anyone else, really, to protect themselves from COVID-19. Especially with this pandemic, he has worked closely with intensive care units all over the world, from China to America. And as you can see by the books behind him, he is the author of over 40 books, including his newest book, Flu Fighters, which we have in the Healthy Shops, and we will be posting the link online. So if anyone does want to purchase it afterwards, you can do so. So now it's over to you, Patrick.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much for having me. As people inevitably join a few minutes late, I wanted to show you a film that we made really right at the start of this, speaking to some of the leading experts in intensive care units who have the best results. And I want to tell you right now, today, I went on to Worldometer, where you have all the statistics on coronavirus, and I looked up in China, how many deaths are there per million? And the answer was 3 per million. How many deaths in the UK per million? And the answer was 624. So there's something they're doing which we are not doing. And I'd like to start by showing you a film which explains, it only lasts for about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, a little bit of what's really not being done right in so many countries, including, I have to say, Kenya. So here we go.
So far we have used around 50 patients already, and based on the preliminary the results, and we found the mortality for the patients using vitamin C is around 24%. While the mortality from the control group is 35%, decreased the IL-6 level compared to the control group, significantly decreased the the duration of the mechanical ventilation.
This is not the virus that's hurting the host, it's the acute inflammatory dysregulated response. That's why you need to use vitamin C and steroids. If you look at the Shanghai guideline, they did 3 things. They gave heparin, they gave vitamin C, and they gave steroids.
Seeing what vitamin C could do, I decided to start giving vitamin C very early. Let's say you are a patient that comes to me with with shortness of breath and an abnormal CT scan like the ones that has circulated among some of us, that is the moment when I put my intermediate unit and I start you on the tail. And we've had several variations of what we have done for the cocktail. I have not had single death, not one death. And I'm getting slammed with 4 to 5 patients per unit minimum. I mean, you don't need to sell me the vitamin C thing. I mean, I know it works.
Intravenous vitamin C, intravenous ascorbic acid, along with corticosteroids, given at the right time, not for mild illness. This is for when the oxygen is dropping, the virus is essentially taking over the lungs, a massive inflammatory response is occurring, and it needs to be done extremely expeditiously within hours, if possible, of presentation to emergency rooms.
When a person starts to have sore throat or nose running, he or she should start take regular vitamin C, for example, 1 gram per every hour.
I take 1 gram of vitamin C twice a day to support my general and immune health, and 1 gram an hour when I get any symptoms of a cold. I've rarely suffered for more than 24 hours, never taken a day off work.
In 1976 to 1977, when another swine flu epidemic is expected, it is especially important that everyone know that he can protect himself to a considerable extent against the disease and its consequences by the use of this important nutrient, vitamin C.
So I wanted to show you that film because in a way it says it all, but let's go into a little bit more detail. This morning I went on to Worldometers to have a look at Kenya. And what you're seeing up here running up to the end of September is the reported deaths. That's the top half, and then mirrored in the bottom half is the reported cases. So things don't seem to be too bad. They're not increasing, they may be decreasing. Of course, there's always a problem getting accurate numbers. Now here am I back in the early 1980s with Dr. Linus Pauling. When Einstein was asked, are you a genius? He said, if you want a real genius, it is Linus Pauling. He had 2 unshared Nobel Prizes. He was the man who worked out how molecules bond together, the electrical, the nature of the chemical bond. He actually nearly got a Nobel Prize for the structure of DNA. He also worked out how genes cause a disease and how the environment affects genes, which is a whole new field of epigenetics. He thought about how ether makes you unconscious, worked out the theory on the chemistry of unconsciousness, and thus was born all the modern anesthetics. The man was a total genius, the greatest chemist ever known. And he dedicated the last 39 years of his life to studying vitamin C. And as you saw, he wrote a book in the 1970s, which basically proved already by the 1970s that we can protect ourselves from any virus, including the coronavirus, the COVID virus. And for that reason, I have dedicated my book to him because he dedicated 39 years of his life to the science of nutrition and vitamin C and suffered 39 years of unfounded abuse and denigration, and continues to do so from the ill-informed, ill-advised, and poorly educated medical pharmaceutical community, who in so doing have deprived humanity of one of the most extraordinary, cheap, and non-toxic medicines. This has to stop. The point is that vitamin C has been around ever since oxygen life forms existed. Really, really, really old molecule. And what amazed him is that all animals make vitamin C, except for primates and guinea pigs and the bats. And he found that the animals that make vitamin C really don't suffer from viral diseases, or it's very rare that they succumb. And they also don't suffer from cancer. So he spent 39 years specifically looking at vitamin C, viruses, and cancer. And if it wasn't for his work, I wouldn't be here today. Your immune system is your defense. It's like your police force. The skin, obviously, is part of your defense. The digestive tract, where the food enters the body, this is the most important part of immunity with all your microbiome, your bacteria. And then in much the same way we have arteries and veins that deliver blood, we have another system called the lymphatic vessels, the lymphatic system, which along which travel lots of white cells, and white blood cells in both your blood and in the lymph have strange names like T cells and B cells and macrophages. And when you are under infection, you may feel sore under the throat or in the groin or under the armpit, where you get a collection of these lymph nodes. And our basic immune cells start in the bone marrow, stem cells, and they're then matured in the thymus gland at the top of your chest. And that's where they turn into, if you like, Army, Navy, Air Force. For example, if you have a vaccine, what you're doing is exposing yourself to an infectious agent, and the body produces antibodies. So B cells make antibodies, so that next time you're exposed, you already know what to do. And for example, here we have a macrophage about to gobble up some bacteria. And the amazing thing is you make 2,000 immune cells every single second. And your ability to make a strong immune system depends upon nutrition. Any virus has to first get inside your cells. And it does that with these spikes called hemagglutinin. And we happen to know that some of the black or blue berries, like elderberries, blueberries, a very strong blue color, can actually inhibit viruses getting inside cells. And then the virus takes over the control center of your cell to make new viruses. So it turns your cells into a virus factory. And then the virus has to break out of the cell, which it does with a spike called neuraminidase. And neuraminidase is inhibited by vitamin C. Some of you may remember the drug Tamiflu, which was widely used but rather ineffective against swine flu. And Tamiflu is a neuraminidase inhibitor, as is vitamin C. Now, your T cells are going to move in to attack the virus, as will the macrophages, which are a bit like vacuum cleaners. And the ability to have strong and fully functioning T cells and macrophages depends on having enough vitamin C, zinc, and also vitamin D. And now a battle begins where the virus fights off your immune army, and your immune army fights the viruses. And the bullets are really oxidants. We could call them oxidant bullets. When you burn something, or even combust glucose to make energy inside your cells, you make oxidants. Think of rusting metal, that's oxidation. Or cutting a piece of apple in half, it goes brown, that's oxidation. And the ability to reload your cells depends on the mineral selenium and vitamin C. Now, once one of your cells has a viral particle inside it trying to invade, it will produce something called interferon, which interferes with the virus's ability to do its work. And interferon is boosted by vitamin C. Actually, we know that the COVID virus actually tries to switch off interferon. That's its main mechanism of suppressing our attack, but vitamin C turns it back on. Something else that's unique about the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, as it's technically called, which produces the disease we call COVID-19, is it attacks red blood cells. And red blood cells deliver oxygen around the body, and they hold the oxygen in this wonderful formation that involves iron. And that's why if you don't have enough iron, you get really, really tired. Actually, in malaria, you get a similar messed up heme. Heme is the molecule that carries the oxygen that needs iron. And the COVID virus also attacks heme, knocks it out of cells, and you start to have lots of iron that should be inside the red blood cell, outside, and that sets up a chain reaction because iron oxidizes, just like rust. So now you get lots of oxidation. Then the liver has to work really hard to make something called ferritin, which is a container to grab all this unstable iron. And then cells can't make enough nitric oxide, which puts the cardiovascular system into a state of stress. And now you're running out of oxygen, a bit like happens in malaria as well. Your oxygenation index plummets, you start to feel really tired, you can't breathe very well. And then actually what happens, because the virus is only really active for 4 to 6 days, is that you end up with lots of dead virus particles, for example, in the blood and in the lungs. And this triggers the immune system to attack, and it overreacts, and this causes what's called a cytokine storm. This is what happens when people have sepsis. Think of it as blood poisoning, usually caused by a bacteria. In this case, it's an overreaction to lots of dead virus particles. Your white blood cell count shoots up. That means your immune system is overactivated, and eventually your army gets depleted, your T cell counts plummet. And also you need your adrenal glands to function because they produce the natural anti-inflammatory cortisol. And when the adrenals can't function, the body stops fighting. And everything I'm telling you here is reversed by vitamin C plus steroid drugs. Steroids are anti-inflammatory agents that mimic the natural cortisol that you produce in your adrenal glands. And also because this virus causes some very bad clotting, you need anticoagulant drugs as well. So there's really 2 phases going on in COVID. The first is the viral phase, which is happening usually in the first week or so. And then if you haven't got rid of the virus by then, and by the way, if you do the right thing, you can get rid of this virus in 24 hours, then you can start to have more problems in the lung. And if this doesn't get resolved, usually by the 3rd week, things can get pretty serious when your body triggers the cytokine storm. But the important thing is no one dies from the virus. They actually die from cytokine storm, the overreaction of the immune system. So the people who work in intensive care units with sepsis, which is a blood poisoning, they already know that you can measure very, very low levels of vitamin C, the level that would diagnose scurvy in sepsis patients. I am now literally every day starting to get the measures from intensive care units. So one in the US, by the way, your blood vitamin C level should be above 50 units in the green. And this US intensive care unit, their patients, the survivors, so these are the critical COVID patients, have a level of 29, which is already too low. The non-survivors had a level of 15.4, which is almost at that point of scurvy. In another Spanish ICU, they've measured 18 critical COVID patients, and 17 out of 18 had undetectable vitamin C. And finally, a US ICU there, patients in critical care have a level of 22. So we know that scurvy and very low vitamin C is happening in ICUs. Vitamin C is a very simple molecule. It's actually made in all animals from sugar, from glucose, and it's made in plants from fructose. And what's unique about us is we've lost the ability to make vitamin C. And it's to do with one enzyme called GOLO. And we've just lost the ability to make vitamin C. A goat or a dog or a cat or a cow. These are all making many, many grams of vitamin C a day. And the important thing about vitamin C is that every time you burn something, smoke a cigarette or breathe in pollution or eat some fried foods, you generate these oxidizing radicals, these dangerous components, which are a bit like a wanton bachelor looking for a mate. And vitamin C has the ability to complete or neutralize these dangerous oxidants. And it can actually do it twice and then be recycled. Let me show you a short film a friend.
Humans, like guinea pig, apes, bats, and some species of fish, do not generate ascorbate in their bodies. Animals which do generate their own ascorbate make a lot of it and produce even more when they are sick. An adult goat, with a weight roughly that of an adult human, makes about 13,000 milligrams daily, and when faced with life-threatening diseases or severe toxic challenges, goats can produce as much as 100,000 milligrams of vitamin C per day. Animals which don't generate their own ascorbate eat a lot of vegetables. An adult gorilla in the wild will eat a whopping 18 kilograms of vegetation, the equivalent of 4,500 milligrams of ascorbate in its food.
Or I'd rather a banana.
Extrapolating from the natural diet of apes, Pauling argued that for a human adult eating only vegetables to generate 2,500 kcal, an acceptable daily level of food energy would entail also consuming 2,300 milligrams of ascorbate. Consequently, he believed that the RDA set at 60 milligrams per day in the US and 40 milligrams in the UK, and based purely on the amount of vitamin C needed to avoid scurvy, was much too low.
So we'd actually lost the ability to make vitamin C at a time, many millions of years ago, when probably we were living in the jungle and, like a gorilla, able to eat lots of vitamin C. And if we lost the ability to make vitamin C, this is a genetic mutation in one of our early ancestors, this would have been an advantage because you don't have to use up all that energy-giving glucose to make vitamin C. So probably that bloodline became dominant. And here we are with a problem. And the link between vitamin C and infections is so well known. The science on this is really excellent. This is one of the best researchers, Professor Harry Hemmeler. You saw him in the film. He's professor of public health in Helsinki. And I've also written papers. This is one that came out last month. Could vitamins help COVID-19 in the journal Nutrients? We've got more and more good science. Now, one of the things that you often hear is there's no point taking vitamin C, you just make expensive urine. Now, what you're looking at here is a graph, and basically what it shows is blood level, that's on the left-hand side, and the dose underneath. So what it's showing is the blood level goes up and up and up until you hit about 500 milligrams, which is about 5 oranges or half a vitamin C tablet. Many of them are 500 milligrams, some are 1,000. And then you'll see this is in a normal healthy person, in a normal healthy situation, not under viral attack. And then what you'll see is that the blood level does continue to rise once you're taking 1,000 milligrams, which is a gram, even up to 2,000, and actually up to about 5,000. It's still increasing, but less so. You know, the curve is flattening. So I take 2 grams a day. I take 1,000 in the morning and 1,000 at lunch anyway. I do that every day for good general protection. Here's a friend of mine, Owen Fonerow, and what he's done here in the solid black line is he's taken a great big gulp of 10 grams of vitamin C. It's about 2 teaspoons of vitamin C powder or 10 pills. And you can see his blood level goes straight up, and then it starts to come down, and then it goes up a bit, and then it comes down. And this is all measuring over 1 hour. He also compares this with taking a different form of vitamin C, which is called Ascorbate. In this case, it's ascorbic acid attached to sodium, but you can get potassium, magnesium, calcium ascorbate. And you can see it's not quite as good as the pure vitamin C ascorbic acid. Now, in this next chart, the black line again is a 10-gram dose of ascorbic acid. And the dotted line is actually intravenous sodium ascorbate. And vitamin C, if you put it directly into the blood, will raise levels higher, especially over time. But what you're seeing here is that vitamin C level goes up and then down and then up and then down and then up and then down almost every few minutes. And that's because it's being recycled. It's doing its antioxidant work, being reloaded inside your cells and then back to work again. It's very important. Some people have got a bit excited about another form of vitamin C called liposomal vitamin C. Vitamin C basically attached to a fat or a lipid. Now, vitamin C is absorbed very quickly through the stomach. And what this chart is showing is that the liposomal vitamin C raises blood levels a little bit more, but it's a lot more expensive. My advice, if you're fighting a virus and you take vitamin C up to your maximum level, the level that you can tolerate without getting loose bowels or diarrhea, is use the cheaper stuff, ascorbic acid. And then thereon, if you want to get really high, you can use the liposomal. It's more money. It does absorb through a different channel. So we're learning ways of getting blood level very high. Here's the packet of ascorbic acid injection. Now, this is like when you buy a drug and you see all the contraindications and all the risk factors and so on. And this says there are no contraindications to the administration of ascorbic acid. And the last sentence says, however, as much as 6 grams have been administered parenterally to normal adults without evidence of toxicity. When have you ever seen that on a drug? Now, what happens is if you look in the body as where there is the most vitamin C, there is 100 times more vitamin C in the adrenal glands that sit on top of your kidneys than anywhere else in the body. And when the adrenal glands are stimulated by a physiological stress, which includes a viral attack, they actually release vitamin C into the bloodstream, and they also release cortisol, which is our natural anti-inflammatory steroid. And what you're seeing here shows that blood levels of vitamin C can go up to 20 times higher when the adrenal glands are stimulated. The big problem is that in COVID-19, in the final cytokine storm phase, if you've run out of vitamin C, the adrenals don't work, the cortisol that your adrenals would produce don't work, so you get this massive inflammation. And then you have to inject into the bloodstream both the steroid hormone and also the vitamin C. And that's, here is the Zhongnan hospital in Wuhan. I was showing you the results earlier. They're now actually, they're in pre-publication, so the results are out. I don't need to go through all that, but this was the first proper randomized controlled trial showing they were not using steroids here. They were just giving vitamin C or water in the drip to people on ventilators. And in the UK, we have an average mortality of 41% of people who are in an intensive care unit. There is one intensive care unit in Chelsea and Westminster using only 2 grams. They have the lowest mortality of 29%. They wanted to give 4 grams, 2 grams twice a day intravenous. Earlier you saw Professor Marrick's ICU, and he has 6.5% mortality. In Houston, we saw that 3.5% mortality. Basically, no one is dying if they're treated in the right way, which we call the MATH plus protocol. M is for the steroid. Methylprednisolone is the best. A is for ascorbic acid. T is for thiamine, which is B1. H is for heparin, the anticoagulant. And the plus is for vitamin D, zinc, quercetin. They're also useful. And basically, no one is dying who doesn't already have an end-stage disease, like lung cancer or liver cirrhosis, and isn't also over 85. Now, what happens is vitamin C, when it's spent, it's given its antioxidant, has to be reloaded. And there's a complex system of a number of nutrients, including vitamin E, something called glutathione, something called lipoic acid or lipoate, selenium, zinc, niacin, that's B3, thiamine, B1. You know, there's a whole lot of nutrients that support the critical function of vitamin C. And that's why you want to take a little bit of time to learn about optimum nutrition. And the simplest way to describe this is if you, for example, smoke a cigarette or eat some chips, French fries, then the damaged fat will damage you. And vitamin E helps to protect you. It's a bit like the oxidant is a spark from a fire, and the vitamin E is like a fireproof glove. Vitamin E then becomes oxidized and has to be reloaded or recycled by coenzyme Q10. And then the spark is passed to vitamin C and then to glutathione. Glutathione is onions and garlic. Vitamin C is fruit and veg. Vitamin E is seeds and fish. And you can see that glutathione is recycled by anthocyanidins. That's the blue, red, purple foods, beta carotene. That's the orange food. So you want to eat multicolored foods. That's going to help and support antioxidation. Now, there's a real classic. I've been reading reports. There were massive predictions of deaths in Central Africa, and they just haven't happened. And the scientists were scratching their heads, but I don't think their heads were full of a lot of brains, because we've always known that flu hits in particular zones in the world that are far away from the equator do not get the angle of sun necessary to generate vitamin D, which is made in your skin in the presence of sunlight. The darker your skin, the less you make. It's a natural adaptation. So if you want to do really badly on vitamin D, be very dark-skinned, be, for example, a Muslim woman, and cover yourself up completely, live indoors and emigrate to somewhere like Scotland. Then you've got no skin exposed to enough sunlight to make vitamin D. So what you're seeing here is what happens to vitamin D across an English or American winter, obviously different in Kenya. Levels start to go down from October. By January, February, March, our levels are really, really low. And here what you're seeing is, when does flu strike? What are the peak months for flu activity in the UK and America? December, January, February, March. It's not the same in Kenya. That's very, very important. But we know that there is a direct track between vitamin D and flu epidemics. The other factor is temperature and humidity. Viruses like cold and wet. That's their best environment. So sometimes you get a little bit of flu activity in Kenya during the rainy season. But generally, you know, from now onwards, as you get through, you know, December, January, February, and the temperature is higher, viruses don't really survive above 30 degrees. So I don't think it's going to be so bad for you. Another nutrient that's terribly important is the mineral zinc. Nothing can grow without zinc. So if it grows, it's got zinc in it. So if you plant a bean or a nut or a seed in the ground, it's got zinc. If it's an egg, it's got zinc. If it's any fish or meat, it's going to have zinc. And zinc is so important for maturing immune cells that the thymus, which is a gland in the base of your throat, if you don't have zinc, it actually shrinks. And if you give a child who's lacking in zinc, you can actually measure the thymus increase, and the thymus is where your immune cells are trained up for their specific functions. Zinc is antiviral. If you can get zinc inside cells, it stops viruses from replicating. And the COVID virus actually inhibits zinc getting inside cells. So you need to give zinc a little bit of a help. And hydroxychloroquine, the malaria drug, actually helps to get zinc inside cells. And so too does a nutrient called quercetin, which is very rich in red onions. I like to eat a red onion every day. And if you get enough zinc during a viral attack, it can reduce the duration of symptoms by 1/3, which is quite a lot. And there's lots of really good studies on this. Now, you and I, we need about 15 milligrams of zinc a day. In my multivitamin, I take 10 because I know I'm going to eat at least 5. But if I've got a cold or flu, I need much more. And the studies that have really worked with zinc have given a dose of at least 60 milligrams of zinc. You do not need that on a normal day, but if you increase your zinc during viral attack, it really helps. And once again, quercetin in red onions helps. There's good evidence for that. And quercetin is a wonderful natural anti-inflammatory. And it's also really, really good for the lungs. So if you've actually had COVID-19 and haven't recovered, quercetin is very important. You probably want to have about 500 milligrams of quercetin. You can buy supplements in Healthy You. And also you want to have high dose vitamin C. Not so easy to get in Kenya, but black elderberry and black elderberry extracts and black elderberry syrups also inhibit viruses. They're not good in the final stage of cytokine storm, but they're very good in the early stage. Now, my book, Flu Fighters, which is now in the Healthy You stores, I also am giving away a free chapter, chapter 9, which is called Surviving Respiratory Distress. And if you go to the website flufighters.net, you'll be able to download this chapter. Please send it to all of your friends. It's very important to do that. So yes, here's the paper that we wrote recently on vitamins and COVID. So really what we want is less colds and flu, less viral and respiratory infections. And right now, the evidence exists that vitamin C in high doses, and remember Linus Pauling and myself and Professor Harry Hemler, we all say the same thing. The minute you get the sign of a cold or flu, you take 1 gram, 1 vitamin C pill an hour, because it comes in and out of your body very quickly, 1 gram an hour until you have no more symptoms. We have evidence vitamin D helps, vitamin E helps, vitamin A helps. We want shorter colds and flu. We know that vitamin C does that, and elderberry, and also zinc. And we want less severe symptoms. And we know that vitamin C does that, and elderberry, and also ginger. So in the UK, I was asked to formulate my perfect vitamin C. I hope soon this will be available in Kenya as well. But what's in it is ascorbic acid, vitamin C, plus black elderberry, plus ginger, plus bilberry, which is a very powerful, it's like blueberry antioxidant, and also zinc. And if you're taking one of these an hour, so let's say 20 pills over a 24-hour period, obviously you're going to sleep for a few hours, then you're going to get zinc 3 milligrams times 20, that's 60 milligrams. That's the kind of level that actually really works. And also in the UK, we have a powder. And by the way, here's something you might do. You've got fantastic ginger in Kenya, and maybe you have a juicer. And if you don't, you'll know someone who does. You can juice ginger, pour it into ice cube trays, and stick it in the fridge. You could do the same thing with lime juice as well, make lime juice ice cubes. The reason I'm saying this is if you ever suddenly find you're coming down with a cold or flu and you haven't got any ginger, you haven't got any limes, you've got it in the deep freeze. You can pop a couple of ginger ice cubes, a lime ice cube, a spoonful of vitamin C powder into a cup. It's not destroyed by heat. Pour in some hot water and get some immediate relief. And that very high dose ginger is really excellent. So the book Flu Fighters has a free chapter. It's got, on the website, there are lots of podcasts. You can actually hear people like Professor Marek and Harry Hemler and various others talk. There's a lot of supporting material. Please share this with any doctor that you know. You may have heard of the R number, which is basically, if the number is 2, it means that if you infect 2 people and they infect 2 people, suddenly we've got a lot of virus flying around the place. Well, I want you to infect 2 people with this message. So I want you to get not 1 copy of this book, get 2. and give it to somebody else, read yours, maybe lend it to someone else, get them to pass it on, to spread the word, to teach people, because the one thing you can do right now is to boost your own immune system. This is totally under your control. And then I don't think you're really going to have anything to worry about. In the UK, we've started a campaign on the website change.org/vitamin C for UK. This is Linus Pauling. By the way, the book cover, I'm not a communist. The symbol on the book, as you saw here, is actually the C is for corona, COVID, or colds. So the idea is your immune system can smash any virus if you know what to do. And maybe in Kenya, we could start C for Kenya, protect our people. This is something under your control that you can do. I'm going to come out of sharing now, and then we can, take your questions and do it like that. How do I do this? Exit. Here we go. Stop share. Good. Okay, Shivani and everybody listening. Catherine, it's good to see you. So yes, I'm here and I'm ready to answer your questions.
Great, thank you. That was incredibly informative. I was just here taking down my notes as well for future reference. We're having a few questions as well with people coming in, and it's good that we have a little bit of time. So the first question we're going to address is from Paul, and he asked that I'm told ascorbic acid goes straight through, so I also take ascorbic palmitate. Is that a good idea?
No, not necessary. Ascorbic acid doesn't go straight through. Ascorbic acid is exactly what animals make. It's exactly what we're designed to absorb. And the first place where ascorbic acid is absorbed is in your stomach. And you actually need enough acidity. Ascorbic acid is slightly acidic, and the stomach is slightly acidic. So your stomach will immediately take vitamin C and raise blood levels. We saw that in my friend Owen Fonero's experiment, where 10 grams immediately raised blood levels. There's a second transport system, which works a bit slower. And it's only really when they're completely saturated that you'll end up with any vitamin C lower down in the gut. So for example, some people who take a lot of ascorbic acid say they feel a bit, windy or a bit sort of acidy, etc. And the usual reason for that is that they're actually lacking stomach acid. And if they took the vitamin C either with a citrus fruit, because remember, it's only the acidic fruit that are high in vitamin C, that's interesting already, or if they had a little bit of cider vinegar, diluted in water, they increase the acidity. If you were on an antacid drug like omeprazole, Nexium, that's going to inhibit your ability to absorb vitamin C. So the idea of ascorbic palmitate is a fat. So it's trying to use the fat absorption technique to get more vitamin C in. But no, this is not more effective. The body knows what to do with ascorbic acid. Some would say it's synthesized, which is true. It's made in a laboratory from sugar, but all animals synthesize vitamin C in exactly the same way. So it's both natural, it's the normal form of vitamin C, and it is synthesized.
Okay, yeah, no, that's definitely fascinating, and I'm sure that, sometimes, like you mentioned, if you're taking things like Nexium or antacids, it could mess up with that. So just following up to that question, when you're taking such medications, for example, does that mean that you need to increase your vitamin C intake?
I'm not a great fan of those medications because I think they're doing the wrong thing. What happens there is that people often get digestive problems because they actually make not enough stomach acid, which is very, very common. So to some extent, yes, or take your vitamin C with something a little acidic like cider vinegar diluted in water. But I'm not a tremendous fan. I have a book called Improve Your Digestion. And if you've got digestive problems, I would recommend reading that. By the way, one of the reasons why diabetics are generally doing worse with COVID-19 is because both vitamin C and sugar share the same transport system. And if your sugar metabolism is messed up, then it's going to interfere with your ability to use vitamin C. So in a sense, we could say that sugar and vitamin C are enemies.
Ah, okay, that's quite interesting to note as well. Similar to this, someone, Hitesh, is asking, can vitamin C cause acidity and what can you do about it then?
No, it doesn't work like that. So no is the answer, really. And if you are experiencing acidity, it's actually because you're not absorbing the vitamin C because you don't have enough stomach acid. So it sounds ironic, but what you actually do have to increase your acid level, again with cider vinegar or some citrus fruit.
Yeah.
And that's really, if you want, you can take an alkaline form of vitamin C. I mentioned that sodium, calcium, magnesium, or potassium ascorbate,
Yeah.
which is more alkaline, but it doesn't work quite so well. My vitamin C powder in the UK is actually half the ascorbate form and half the ascorbic acid form, but I'm still trying to keep it slightly acidic with a pH of about 5. 7 is neutral pH, above 7 is alkaline, and the stomach is naturally at about 5 pH. And that's the optimal place for the absorption of vitamin C. So, you can play around, but I've had a number of people going through COVID-19 infection with some pretty severe symptoms, and they have reported to me that the ascorbic acid causes an immediate relief in symptoms more so than the ascorbate form.
Okay, well, that's good to note as well. One really good question from Muthoni in the comments is asking that one may be able to access the fruits, veggies, and nuts, but of course there's a lot of debate on the cooking methods to ensure that the nutrition is intact when you're consuming it. So what is the best sort of method of consumption?
Well, I think, in sort of traditional Indian food, if I use it as an example, or Chinese historically, we learned, or it was learned, to overcook foods, which was very sensible at the time because there was a lot of amoebas, and dysentery and, bugs that are basically in food. But provided your food is grown in a clean way, the best thing to do is to eat it raw. And if you don't eat it raw, then you can do what I do, which is steam fry. So if, for example, I want to make something, I might use some red onions rich in quercetin, and garlic, by the way, also is very, very good. And I'm going to use a little oil. I might use some olive oil, or a little bit of coconut butter would be good, or butter. You actually want to use a hard fat, a saturated fat. It will generate less oxidants and never get to the smoke point where it's smoking. So now you're sauteing something, and maybe I've chopped up some peppers and carrots and tomatoes, or, whatever. If I'm vegetarian, I maybe, want some tofu, maybe some broccoli heads, something like that. And of course, if you're having this is a sort of stir fry, you could put in some bits of fish or meat or whatever you want. But at some point, I'm just generating heat. Then I'm going to have a water-based sauce. Simple example would be a dessert spoon of water, dessert spoon of soya sauce or tamari, and a dessert spoon of lime or lemon juice, mixed together and then poured into the pan or the frying pan. The whole lot steams. You stick the lid on, you turn the heat down, and now you're steam frying. So the point is, you're not deep frying. The temperature is not that high. And in that way, you will not get the destruction of nutrients. But if you cook things to death, then there's less nutrients in it. So so you can eat hot, but almost raw. That's the way to do it.
So sort of lightly cooked in a summary. And I do agree definitely with Indian food. Sometimes it's cooked excessively past the point of maybe containing its complete nutritional value. Philip asks, I often experience bladder irritation whenever I take vitamin C supplements. So what could be the problem here?
Oh, that is interesting. I mean, usually it's actually, I just had someone yesterday who has bladder irritation, and the one thing that cures it for them is vitamin C. So it's funny. But what you could, I mean, when there's actually bladder infection, there are two things that work. One is a very alkaline sort of intake or a very acid intake. So I think you should definitely explore whether there's a different effect for you with the ascorbic acid, which is the acid form of vitamin C, or ascorbate, which is the alkaline form of vitamin C.
So there are alternatives as well.
Yeah, and actually even in the chemist, you know, some of the things that are used like potassium citrate, very, very alkaline. So some of the things that are used to help to get rid of a low grade potential bladder infection are either very alkaline or very acid. And that's because certain bacteria thrive or cannot survive when you push the acidity or alkalinity in one or other direction.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know. This is quite an interesting question. As someone who does not eat foods growing underground, so I'm assuming they're maybe Jain in religion, what are the natural foods that you recommend? For example, you mentioned garlic and ginger, which, and turmeric even, actually, on that note.
Yeah, no, it's true. Well, I don't know what to say there. I mean, there's obviously lots of foods that, you know, that do grow overground. And you tend to be, you know, relying either on leaves but some of the broccoli, you know, for example, the heads of broccoli is very, very high in protein. So, you know, seeds and nuts and leaf foods, you know, all of those are good. Beans, lentils, you know, all of these are really good foods. So there's a lot that you can eat above the ground that's good for you. So yeah, that's what I would go for.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. My own personal question, you mentioned that a lot of times with COVID, for example, the main sort of danger comes with the overreaction of the immunity that comes past the viral phase almost. And
yes.
So is a partial reason why some areas have higher death rates, for example, a correlation with countries that have higher obesity levels, for example, as an indicator of lower nutritional populace health?
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. And there are a lot of factors like obesity. You know, there's this whole, you know, Asian, African, darker skin, vitamin D thing. And also we know that, you know, Asian, African, sometimes there are genetics that make them more prone to diabetes. So definitely not getting enough vitamin D, sun exposure, being overweight, being diabetic, these are all risk factors. But I'll tell you something really interesting in this. The single biggest risk factor, if you look at the statistics, is age, as you would expect. Yeah. You know, in other words, people over 90 are more likely to die from COVID-19 than, you know, there's in the UK, we've had one death in someone under 14, but we don't really know the circumstances. We know that they were immune compromised. So this virus is generally, you know, is not really a danger for children under the age of 14. We also know that pregnant women have a very low risk. And the more pregnant they are, the less is the risk. This is, of course, all very, very good news. But if you look statistically, age appears to be the biggest risk factor. But in the recent study I was just looking at this week, where they had the vitamin C levels of people with critical COVID, they actually controlled for that variable. Yes. In other words, you know, when you say age, there may be many other things going on. They found that if you control for the vitamin C variable, age is no longer a predictor of risk. The biggest predictor of risk is actually your blood vitamin C level. In other words, older people may be more likely to die precisely because their vitamin C levels are lower. Yeah. So that's very important. And if you do have, you know, elderly relatives, they definitely need to be taking extra vitamin C. The older you get, the less well you absorb nutrients, the less well you use them. But also your cells become, you know, like a bit of a worn out factory. They're making more exhaust fumes. They're less efficient. So I, for example, have increased my vitamin C level as I age. Linus Pauling, you know, who died in his 90s, he ended up taking 6 grams a day, while I'm taking 2 grams a day. So the older you are, the more you need of certain nutrients because your metabolism becomes less efficient.
Yeah, no, that completely makes sense. We actually have a question sort of jumping from vitamin C to selenium. We have a question from Kishan in our Facebook live feed, and he's asking, how good is selenium? I know you touched on it briefly, but...
Well, no, selenium is very interesting. I want to stress here that if you're actually under massive viral attack, nothing works better than vitamin C. So in studies that have given vitamin D under viral attack or given selenium under viral attack, they don't tend to make an immediate difference. I could say a bit more about vitamin D because there's a couple of studies which gave people had very low levels, very high dose of vitamin D, and that did help. Now, the thing about selenium, and you may or may not know this, but if you look at HIV virus and the instance of HIV deaths across Africa, they are highest in the areas that have the lowest selenium level in the soil and lowest in the areas that have the highest level. So selenium comes from the sea. So eating seafoods will give you more selenium. Senegal, which was under the sea, has very high selenium in the soil, very low HIV deaths. Well, you know, it's interesting. Now, what happens is one of the lowest levels of selenium in the world is actually in the Hubei province in China. That's where Wuhan is. Okay. So selenium levels are very low in the Wuhan population. And what we know about selenium is that when an animal is deficient in selenium, and by the way, the bats there are deficient in selenium, it allows viruses to mutate more rapidly. And that's what we've got here. We've got a viral mutation. So there's a lot of interest going on in that if somebody were deficient in selenium, then viruses can survive and mutate better in them. So selenium is important. The trouble with selenium, you need about 100 micrograms a day. That's what I supplement or aim for. I actually supplement less, about 50 micrograms, because I'm also going to eat it in seafood, seeds and nuts and so on. But 200 micrograms is probably the highest you ever want to go for a short period of time, because even 500 micrograms can be toxic. Now, vitamin C is quite different. 10 milligrams will stop you dying from scurvy. But 100,000 milligrams, that's 100 grams, is not toxic.
Yeah. Okay.
It'll give you loose bowels if you had it orally, but it's not toxic.
Yeah.
No one dies from vitamin C.
There's
10
no
liters.
that we're taking vitamin C.
You cannot overdose on vitamin C. The worst that can happen is you get loose bowels and then you take less. It's like a Vindaloo, you know?
Yeah.
It's not really a big deal. You cannot die. You can die from water. If you drink 10 liters of water in under 10 minutes, you can die.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
So vitamin C is less toxic than water.
Wow.
But selenium, you know, 100 micrograms, good for all of us. 200 micrograms, maybe for a couple of weeks if you're sick. 500 micrograms can be dangerous. So you've got to be a little careful with selenium.
Yeah, so more cautious with that. On that note as well, I think we're going to take 3 last questions and we're almost at time. So I mean, we talked about vitamin C being dangerous, and we have 2 people asking about children and vitamin C, their supplementation. So what would you recommend?
Well, you can almost sort of halve the dose. It's kind of to do with body weight. So if your child is half your body weight, give them half the amount. So generally, if a child's got an infection, then you want to give them 500 milligrams every hour. And, you know, like we would take 1 gram an hour. You could even take 2 grams every 2 hours if you prefer, but the best is 1 gram an hour for a child, 500 milligrams. And, you know, I don't know if it was COVID, but I had, you know, a couple of months ago, an extreme flu right in the middle of summer. No one else had it. It had a lot of the hallmarks of Corona, and I felt pretty lousy. And it took me 18 hours. So I did everything I'm telling you. And in 18 hours, I had the fever and everything. 18 hours, you get a cold sweat, the fever's over, it's gone. Your immune system has won. So I've done this since I was in my 20s. It really works.
Amazing. That's incredible. And so similarly, chronic conditions that have occurred from viral infections. So someone had a viral infection in the inner ear, and still has residual symptoms till today. So is there any sort of protocol that you can recommend in combat?
Well, first of all, a lot of people, who are having a viral infection and then recover, they will have been through a period of depletion of vitamin C, zinc, and these other nutrients. So you have to reload afterwards. And I mentioned certainly for the lungs, quercetin, is really helpful, about 500 to 1,000 milligrams. But what I often recommend people doing who aren't fully recovering from a virus is taking vitamin C up to their bowel tolerance level.
Oh, wow.
So like, without being too graphic, if I take 5 grams a day right now, I hit my bowel tolerance level. But when I had this flu a couple of months ago, I was taking, 20 grams a day, a gram an hour, no bowel tolerance level. So if you haven't recovered, take vitamin C together with zinc. Make sure your vitamin D level is good. Ideally, you have a blood test to find out it needs to be at least over 75 nanogram per liter. Ideally over 100, even better, but certainly 75. So take some zinc, take some vitamin C, high dose, up to your bowel tolerance for a week or so, and see what happens. And very often that accelerates recovery.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that can also then change depending on your body's need, like you mentioned. Right now, if you were to take it, it'd be problematic, but when you're sicker and your body demands it, then you can go much higher.
Yeah, I mean, I have a girl with a cancer patient at the moment, and I'm helping her with her nutrition. And it's a very rare cancer that no one's pretty much survived from, 1 in a million. She's doing fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
Amazing.
And, she's doing really well. And the tumor has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And she is actually taking 40 grams a day. That's how much she can tolerate before she hits bowel tolerance. Wow. So when your immune system is fighting something, be it a virus or a bacteria. I mean, by the way, in sepsis, which is blood poisoning bacteria, vitamin C is really, really good. But zinc is not.
Okay.
Zinc interferes with antibiotics. So if you have true sepsis from a bacterial infection, you have to have intravenous antibiotics. But if you can also take high dose vitamin C, you will recover very quickly.
Okay, that's good to know. And last question, what is the best time to take vitamin C, morning or at night, and before or after food?
Because it's absorbed in an acidic environment, it's absolutely great to take it with food. In other words, when you eat food, especially protein food, it tells your stomach to produce acid, and that acid will absorb vitamin C. And of course, that's what, when we eat vitamin C in food, we're eating it in food. And where is it in nature? It's in the acidic food. So basically, ideally have it with meals. And most importantly is don't just have it once a day, have it twice a day, because it's in and out of the body in 6 hours. And if you're really sick, of course, you have to have it more than twice a day. So, I mean, to give you an example, it's slightly different, but in the ICUs, intensive care units, are getting the best results. They're giving 3 grams intravenously 4 times a day. Yeah. And that's 12 grams. And intravenous vitamin C is about twice as powerful as oral. So when I say 1 gram an hour, that's about, the equivalent. Remember, their patients are on not on ventilators, but they're having support with their breathing. So it's rather hard for them to take, a pill every hour. But yes, so take it twice a day. And if you do that, as Linus Pauling said, you will live longer, you will feel better, and, you'll stay healthy. Vitamin C is probably the single most important discovery that's ever been made in nutrition. And the only reason that you didn't know all this information is very simply, it's dirt cheap.
Yeah.
It can help so many diseases. And I have to tell you, the drug companies do not want you to know about the power of vitamin C. So please read the book, spread the word, save lives, stay well, and stay free.
Great. Incredible. Thank you so much. It was truly an enlightening discussion. Like you mentioned, unfortunately, a lot of the knowledge sort of is backed by money-making giants, so to speak. And, vitamin C through your work and through your founder's work has definitely has the potential to change the world, especially in this time period. We're so thankful to all the attendees who have joined us. We had, I think, about 140 people total, both on here and on the Facebook Lives, which is incredible. Thank you all for the support. I know there's still so many questions coming in, but just as a note, we do have Dr. Patrick Holford's books in store. So as Kate has been typing in the comments, you can purchase them online, and we can either deliver it to you or get them sent to the shop ready for pickup. And if you have any other nutritional questions, all of our healthy stores do have nutritionists that are free for you to talk to and get all this nutritional advice as well to supplement.
And you can also ask me your questions on Facebook. So I have a very active Facebook. If you've got a question, please feel free to ask there. It's a great way to get informed. And I'm sure when all this COVID is over, we can have some good seminars and workshops in Kenya. I love Kenya. It's a fabulous country.
Exactly.
And, yeah,
hopefully we'll get you around and down soon, and then people can actually have this presentation and more knowledge for you to pass on in person. Great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you all who joined, and we will then catch up with everyone soon. Have a good rest of the evening, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.